Assisted suicide laws make vulnerable people far more vulnerable. We know this because, despite the lack of transparency around assisted suicide and how it operates abroad, stories come out from the places that have taken this step. Stories like the story of Christopher Lyon. In Canada in 2021, Lyon discovered that his father was scheduled to have an assisted death in 2 days' time. His father had a history of severe depression, so Lyon pushed for there to be a last-minute psychiatric assessment. There was. Subsequently, Lyon got access to the text of that and said it was full of basic errors about his father's psychiatric history. How had his father qualified for an assisted death? He had skipped some meals and had an elevated white blood cell count, and the doctor suggested that this could be an infection which might prove lethal. On that basis, Christopher Lyon's severely depressed father received lethal drugs at the hands of the Canadian state. It was, Lyon says, the worst day of his life. Story from earlier this year from Australia about a woman called Ellen. She had been promised a government-funded care package, but so had more than 70,000 people who were on the same waiting list. And with no immediate prospect of being able to get a suitable home care package, she applied for and received lethal drugs at the hands of the state. These stories represent the reality of assisted suicide. The reality is that when we introduce these laws, we no longer have a policy of protecting life. Instead, if you fit the bill, the state will assist you to take your own life. This is the new freedom we're being offered. Now, the defenders of the bill, which is going through Parliament, will tell you that their criteria are incredibly strict, that you need to have a 6-month terminal prognosis, you need to be free from coercion, and so on. It's full of safeguards, they say, the legislation. I know the other speakers will be talking about how effective or ineffective those safeguards are in the real world. I've been asked to focus more, and I'll concentrate my remarks on what has just been happening in the House of Commons, because that is the testing ground for how safe this bill is. In recent months, there's been a Commons committee, as most of you probably know, examining the bill, going through it. And Kim Leadbeater, the MP who piloted the legislation, said that this was the process that MPs and the public could trust on to strengthen the bill. Experts would be called in. You would have a committee of MPs who would go through every single clause, every line of the bill. If necessary, it would be amended to make it, as she would put it, even safer than it is already. Well, none of that really happened. The committee was stacked in Leadbeater's favour by 2/3, so she could win pretty much every single vote. And it was the MPs selected were not those with most expertise, but younger and more inexperienced ones. Though, I mean, many of them did a very good job, but it was clear that expertise was being excluded. The experts who were invited to address the committee, the witnesses who came, were even more skewed. Of those who had a position on the bill, it was 80% of them were in favour and 20% were against. And for instance, everybody from a foreign jurisdiction who came to address the committee was a supporter of the bill. There were no sceptical voices from places like Australia and Canada heard. I mean, I think that is one place to start with what Amanda was saying about the democratic deficit in this bill. There is a process by which Parliament, an elected Parliament, is meant to scrutinise legislation, and it wasn't followed very well. The main thing, though, that you need to understand is this. There were literally scores of serious, weighty, well-thought-through amendments to make the bill safer. And almost without exception, Kim Leadbeater's committee rejected them. I'm going to break a rule of public speaking and just read you out a list, basically. MPs proposed changes to bar doctors from raising assisted suicide unprompted before the patient has, to stop doctors raising it with under 18s, to prevent people from receiving lethal drugs because they feel like a burden on loved ones, to explicitly rule out encouraging somebody else to receive an assisted suicide, to narrow the definition of terminally ill so that it doesn't include conditions like diabetes or anorexia, to raise the standard of proof so that the doctors and lawyers assessing these applications have to be sure beyond reasonable doubt that the criteria are met. That was another amendment. And to allow families to appeal if they think a loved one has been granted an assisted suicide wrongly. All of those proposals were voted down. There were amendments to guarantee a palliative care consultation for every applicant, to ensure a meeting with a mental health professional or with a multidisciplinary team at the start of the process, to require doctors to check when someone comes forward for an assisted suicide whether there are suicide risk factors that could be remedied, to make it impossible to apply straight after a terminal diagnosis, which is the time when, after the trauma of that diagnosis, people may be at their lowest ebb, to ensure that doctors ask the patient, why do you want to go through this? To require that the lethal drugs, which according to some researchers may cause highly distressing deaths, at least have to be approved by the regulator, the MHRA. And finally, there were amendments to protect hospices and care homes from being forced to carry out assisted suicide. All of those were rejected. This is not a process that is designed to maximize safety. It is a process that is designed to maximize access to lethal drugs. I'll just say in conclusion, I wouldn't mind so much if assisted suicide supporters were honest. If they said, we want to transform the NHS, the hospice movement and the care sector so that they routinely facilitate assisted suicide as a service like any other. That's what the campaign means. Instead, they will try and tell you that it's incredibly safe. That makes it, in my view, the most deceitful political campaign of the decade. And it is certainly also the most dangerous. The good news is that you can do something about it today by writing to your MP and telling them so. Thank you.
If you like what you saw on the video here, make sure you click on here because we need to carry on the work we're doing, and the way we do that is through our membership. We'd love you to join. Click on here, see what you can do and be part of making things better for all of us together. Thank you.